it, that might not necessarily happen. If you do get a perfect straight line, then that's great. In reality, when we start doing these with actual data figures, we find out that we have certainly a pattern. Like, you can see this is clearly going upwards, but they don't quite lie in a straight line. And that's what we're going to focus on for this one. We're going to find the equation. It's called the line of best fit. So it's the line that basically fits these data points the best. If it's a straight line like this, then it will fit perfectly. And if it's not, we've got to try and find the closest line that we can. Now, when we do these types of questions, what we're looking for then is coordinates or tables of values. So it could be 2 data values like we had in the last unit, or it could be more. So we'll start off with 2, and we're just going to use this new method though for actually finding this. It's called linear regression is the proper name for it. So on this screen here, there's a few steps that's going to tell us how we're going to do this question. So we're going to use our Desmos calculator again, and we're going to click on the plus sign. And once we click on the plus sign, it gives us an option what we want to do. And we want to use a table for this one. So we select table, and then we enter the 2 coordinates. So the 2 coordinates I had were 515 and 1020. So as I'm entering those, notice that I'm not putting parentheses, I'm not putting commas, I'm just literally lining these up. And then you type in the other number. Now, once you've got both numbers typed in, you move down to the next box, and then you have to type in this formula. Now, to get the little subscript 1, you don't have to do anything clever. You literally just type y1, and it will make the 1 look like this. Now, this little symbol here, which I believe is called a cedilla, it's in the top left corner of your keyboard. Once again, you might have to press Shift to get it. And then you're going to type in mx1 plus c. Once again, 1, just type in a regular 1, and it will change it to this subscript for you. And the reason we type this in here is this basically says find the best straight line that you can for different x1s and y1 values that we have plotted in our table here. You can see the list is x1 and y1. And once you type it in, it's basically like y equals mx plus c. And it will tell you what the m and the c are. So here it says 1 and 10. So m, that's your slope. So if the question just says slope, the answer is 1. If it answers for the equation, then you just plug these numbers into here. So it would be 1 plus, and then c is 10, 10. So in other words, your last step is just interpret what that answer means, put an x in front of put an x after the 1 for the slope, and then the other number is just your y-intercept. And then we can go back and we can actually match that up. Now notice it doesn't say 1x plus 10, so we'd have to know that x means 1x. But as this actually is the only one that ends in plus 10, we could probably figure out pretty quickly which is the correct answer. So that's a pretty useful method, but that's going to be one of those things where you're going to have to make sure that you learn the steps of how to do this by clicking on the plus, clicking on the table, entering the values, and then this part here, entering this equation so it can tell you what the actual correct equation is or the correct slope, and then interpreting your answer. Now, sometimes they're going to put the data in different ways, so I'm not going to do every question with you because you're going to need to practice this as you're going along. This actually looks much more like the table that we just used. So you obviously wouldn't type in the words here, you would just type this in. And similarly, you don't need the dollar symbol here, you just need the numbers, so 15.50 and so on. And then as you type it in, it's not y and x this time, it's actually something and c. So this is like x and y. And notice instead of starting with y, it actually starts with c, which is the cost of the pizza. So when you get your answers for this one, it wouldn't be x, it would actually be your t. So you'd be looking for m equals like 1.85 or m equals 17.35 or so on. Notice sometimes they switch it around as well. Sometimes they put the t or the x at the end of the question, not at the start. So the one with the letter, though, is the one that gives you the slope. Sometimes they'll put the tables sideways, so you just got to make sure that as you're writing them, you put them the correct way. So you would have your first value as 536, and then as you continue with this table, you would have 1034, and so on. As we're looking at our answers here, notice the one with the letter would be your slope, so this would be your m. Normally the numbers are very different from each other to make this easy to find out. So it looks like it's either 0.2 positive or negative, or 35 positive or negative as well. And also wording of questions as well. Which equation most closely represents? So what that means is then this line is not perfect, but you've got to pick the one that most closely represents. Okay, so it might not be negative 0.2, it might be like negative 0.18, or it might be negative 0.22. So you'll just have to use a little bit of common sense as you're actually answering that part of the question as well. Same thing here, we can do this because we've got a nice little table again, so we don't need to do that one. Question 5, this looks just like our very first question. When we type this in, we might end up with, if we end up with 1 or -1, then that's going to be easy to do. If we get a decimal, then we've got to try and figure out which one this is. Notice one's positive and one negative. That might be enough to help us figure that. Now, for the slope questions, for the review of these ones, we looked at these in the previous ones. I actually put no multiple choice this time. I deliberately highlighted these in a different color to emphasize that they're the same number. If we try doing this one in Desmos using that same method that I just used a second ago, so I typed in the coordinates, I typed this y1 to the mx1 plus c, and it drew a line for us. Now it does actually say undefined on this one, so that might be a slight worry. And it says the equation is 3x plus 0. Now notice as it draws the equation, that doesn't look a particularly good line for me. I can see there's a perfect straight line here on this question. So sometimes we have to be a little bit careful. We might get let down by our calculator. What I did notice straight away on this question though was, like I said, the x numbers were the same. And not only are they the same, they're both 2. So actually I typed in the equation x equals 2 just to look. And as you can see, it actually draws them straight through both points. So that's really the one that I like, this vertical line here. So if it asked you for the equation, it would be x equals 2. As I have my vertical line and both x numbers are the same, I'm thinking of this word vux. So the clue for this would be, what would be the slope? Undefined. It might just be, like I said, on this number here, it actually says undefined here as well. So that might be a little clue for you as well, possibly. I haven't tried enough questions to know if that works for every single one, though. Now this time I made the y numbers the same, too. And this time as I type it in, it will actually work something out for you. You can see the line it draws is perfect this time. It does actually go through both points. And it says 0 and 2. So if the question just says what's the slope, then that's it, 0. If it asks you for the equation, then you could put 0x plus 2, or even better, as it's 0x, you could just say y equals 2. And I hope you recognize that one as well, kind of slightly quicker, just by the fact that look at this part here. You can see that the y values are 2, that's why the equation is y equals 2. And as you draw this, you can see that horizontal line, which hopefully would remind you about the word hoy as well. Now for question 8, we've got a table, so that shouldn't be too difficult. We can certainly type those ones in. And this time, as we actually type it in to see what it gives us, it will draw that line here for us. I'm going to have to scroll down just a little bit further to get those last numbers in. So m equals 1.25714. So I'm going to put an x next to that for the slope. And then the other number is the equation. Now, as I look back at these, I can see that these are fractions, actually. So that's not going to be quite so easy to tell. One thing I do notice is, though, this is a positive fraction. And the first two answers were negative fractions. So I know it's not those two. So I know it's between these two. If you're not sure, work out what is 4 divided by 5, and you would get 0.8. And work out what 5 divided by 4 is, which is 1.25. That should hopefully convince you that this one is the closest answer. So it's actually D. If you're not sure, you can also do this. After you've got your answer, you can actually type in. I typed in all 4 answers, but I only switched one on at a time. So if I type in answer choice A and graph it, you can see this line doesn't really go through these points at all. And if I click on B, same thing. The slope's going totally the wrong direction, so it's not that one. If I type in C, well, it's going the correct direction now, but it's only really going through this point here. So I don't think C looks very good. But as you type D in, look how close these two lines are now. So that should also help to convince you that that is the correct answer. Now for 9, I've thrown this one in more as an experimental question. This is kind of going to be our little gap question to lead us into next lesson. It says for a 6-year-old here, how long do you think it would take to run a certain amount of time? Notice that 6 is between 4 and 8. So if we know times for a 4-year-old and an 8-year-old, we can probably guess that a 6-year-old, as that's in the middle, is going to be in the middle here. So I'm guessing around 205, and I think that would clearly present a good answer for that one. But we'll also talk about another way you can answer that question next lesson. Question 10 just has the table, so you should be able to work through that. And question 11 also has the table, so you can work through this. All these questions are previous SOL questions, so it will give you a good feel for how you're actually going to answer these questions and what they would look like in the future. But certainly make sure that you understand these steps here, because you're going to use these for every question today, but also every question for the next lesson. And this is only a really short unit as well. This is just going to be 2 lessons, and then you will test. So make sure that you understand this formula here, the y1 Sedilla mx1 plus c, and that will be super important for this. That does it for this video.